It's Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Robert Garcia, he is the Vice Mayor of the city of Long Beach. He was also recently appointed to California's Coastal Commission, a very, very powerful appointment. It's hard to deny. I'd like to get a sense from you, how's it been going over the last few months on this new commission, which everyone looks at?
No, I mean, it's been going great. I think the Coastal Commission obviously is extremely important for the coast and really for the whole state. I think that our coast is our most valuable resource, and so it's been a great experience being on the commission. It's been a few months now. It's great people. The commission is made out of 12. It's basically 12 appointees, and a lot of people don't know that the appointees actually come from 3 different appointing authorities. So
really?
The governor appoints 4 appointments. The Senate, the state Senate, through the Rules Committee, makes 4 appointments. And then the Speaker of the Assembly does 4 appointments.
And your appointment was through whom?
Through the state Senate.
But look, I mean, it's all, rosy to talk about, but really controversial issues are presented before you. Issues that newspapers cover, that we cover. And so it's got to be challenging when you're presented with an issue where tempers flare, where opinions are entrenched. So how do you approach? I mean, look, you are an elected official already, but still, I mean, these are very weighty issues.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, one thing I learned really quickly when I got onto the commission was that the commission, like a lot of state agencies, has been seeing its funding decrease dramatically over the last few years. I mean, you look at decades and decades of budget cuts. And so what the commission can actually do when it comes to permits and looking at projects, it really has slowed the process down. And so there's a lot of complaints out there about how long it takes for something to get through Coastal Commission. And unfortunately, it takes so long because oftentimes there just aren't the resources for them to go through.
There are also complaints that the Coastal Commission is beholden to environmental interests, to the exclusion of every other interest. What's your sense of that reputation?
Well, I think to take one step back, I think it's important to know that one of the philosophies that I believe in, and it's something that a lot of the Coastal Commissioners talk about, is this idea that the coast is never protected. It's always in the process of being protected. You always have to continuously protect the coast. And I think if you look at the coast of California, unlike the coast of, let's say, Florida, you have a very different scenario. What the Coastal Commission did because of the Coastal Act that the voters passed is it essentially created pockets of high-rise development up and down the coast. So you have San Diego, you have Long Beach, a little further north, you've got some activity in the San Francisco Bay Area. But if you look at the rest of the coast, you rarely see kind of these high-rise developments. What you really see is more access to the coast.
Which one could argue is nice, but the flip side is, I mean, you look at significant portions of Los Angeles County, Malibu, Santa Monica, beyond Malibu. I mean, there's nothing but Tony homes and no opportunity for economic expansion. I mean, would it be so bad to have some hotels go up, to have some condominiums go up?
Well, I think we do that already. I think that we do have hotels go up. We do have condominiums go up. But they also have to, I think, work in the landscape of the coast. And I think our greatest asset in California is this incredible coastline and these incredible bluffs and beaches and diversity of what the coast actually looks like, from forests in the North Coast to what we have down here in Southern California. And so I think historically the Coastal Commission has done a good job of protecting the coast. Now, have there been instances in the past where the commission has stopped projects or slowed things down to the detriment of the local economy or some good projects? I mean, absolutely. And I think that the Coastal Commission has also evolved and continues to evolve. I think it's very pragmatic. I have found that just in the short time I've been on board, the staff can recommend X and the commission will end up doing Y.
Really?
And it happens more times than people would think.
But is the staff, I mean, forgive me if I'm doing a bit of inside baseball, but is the staff more environmentally conscious and the commission may vote more economic direction?
I think the staff's point of view, I think, is always what do we do to protect the coast? Because I think we have to realize that every time that we permit a development, every time that we build a hotel, I mean, that land and that public space is, if it's public space, is not going to return to the public. I mean, we can have public access, but it's going to be developed. And so, sure, so I think staff takes a position where we want to be as responsible as possible. And I think we look at it from a point of view of, is this a good development? Is it going to, we have to look at things through the Coastal Act. We can't We're not there to make economic decisions. We're there to make decisions about public access to the coast. Does it comply with the Coastal Act? I think those are the things that we're trying to determine when approving any type of development or anything that happens up and down the coast.
I want to shift gears and talk about a different type of access, and that's accessing various points of the Los Angeles County Basin. As you know, in 1990, the very first true public transportation system that wasn't bus open, and that was the Blue Line.
Right.
From, was it Union Station to Long Beach?
Right.
It's been more successful than ever anticipated. Very significant ridership. But there are concerns that the Blue Line has become a bit of a stepchild, if I can use that metaphor. What's your sense of how Metro looks at and treats the Blue Line?
Well, the LA County MTA system obviously is extremely massive, 26 million boardings a year. The Blue Line alone does about 6 million boardings.
Wow.
Just in the Long Beach area.
You use it?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to get to downtown LA from Long Beach. And just in Long Beach alone, there's 8 stations, which is a large chunk of the Blue Line. But I think what's happened over the years is that the Blue Line has gotten a little bit less attention than some of the other lines.
Why?
So, I'm not sure why. I think that it's the oldest. It's one of the oldest lines. So maybe it hasn't had the kind of attention that the Red Line or the new Expo Line, Gold, others have had throughout the county. And so I think what's happened over the past few years is stations are in worse shape. There's less amenities. Public arts hasn't been replaced.
Right.
It also takes you, for example, 20 minutes to get from kind of the north of Long Beach at the Artesia station to downtown Long Beach. 20 minutes to get from one end to the other. I mean, you can drive quicker.
Right. Why?
Again, there are some issues with synchronization of stops. There just hasn't been, I think, the attention that it needs. And so we've engaged in the last month or so with the county, with Supervisor Kanabe,
meaning?
the city of Long Beach, has engaged with the county, with the supervisor, with MTA, in trying to come up with solutions, particularly when it comes to safety. We have more both pedestrian accidents in the Blue Line than any other line in the MTA system. We also have some crime issues. And so we've had some commitments up front, which is great. We've added 4 sheriff deputy patrols to the Long Beach stations. We have added 4 ticket fare security assistants. As a start, we're adding tap card.
Tap means?
Tap means when people can tap their cards to get onto the station. Those are being all added to all 8 stations. We're fixing the canopies. Now, when we say we depend on Metro to do this. Obviously, the sheriffs are they're contracted by Metro. And so
Long Beach really can't do anything without the involvement of Metro.
Correct. We can advocate. We can cause. We have a megaphone that we're using, and fortunately, I think the county is listening and working with us. But the county has to make these changes.
But I think in a lot of ways you're right that because the line is established, Metro's focus is not on improving the Blue Line, but getting the Expo Line going. And so, where is there a funding source to make these changes?
Well, I mean, the MTA has an incredible amount of funds.
What about Measure R?
Well, right, Measure R, and I mean, you just saw probably how much money they spent on the new station they're opening up there. That the supervisor Ridley Thomas was
right. Oh yes, the Lamert Park.
Right, the Lamert Park. Right. I mean, that's a huge investment, which is a good investment.
Uh-huh.
And so we now have assurances from MTA that they're going to make changes. They're going to change the canopies at the stations on the Blue Line. They're going to change they're going to be replacing the cars in the next few years.
Really?
All of the track on the Blue Line will be replaced in the next 2 years. Those are really important changes that they're going to make.
Will that create increased speed?
That will help us with speed. And they're also going to right now exploring how we can fix some of the crossings on the Blue Line, particularly in Long Beach, to increase the speed, because of the entire system at the MTA, the stops between the North Long Beach station and downtown, it's the slowest response time in the entire county.
Wow.
So we need to make a difference.
And would synchronization help?
Synchronization would help, and some other stuff too, some pedestrian crossing work.
Okay, his name is Robert Garcia. He is the Vice Mayor of the City of Long Beach. He's also a member of California's State Coastal Commission. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter California Edition. Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Our guest, Mike Langston, he is the Chief of Police in Signal Hill, which is where, by the way?
Southeast Los Angeles County, we're completely surrounded by our larger sister city, Long Beach.
Right, and recently though, well, you recently became the chief of police, and in the wake of that, you were recently appointed to California's State 911 Advisory Board. Sir, I admit I remember the days when there was no 911. I would call zero for the operator. Things have changed, and we're now in the 21st century, so what can you tell us about the 911 system in the region and in California?
Right. Well, absolutely, that technology is changing dramatically. There was a time not long ago when everyone had a landline telephone in their home, and cell phones were unknown technology. And that's changed dramatically in the last 15, 20 years.
And I want to ask you about that very issue, because I think there's still some confusion amongst the public about whether you need a landline to have the optimum 911 service. I know a few years ago, I mean, this is now 5 years ago, I was considering dropping my landline. And I was persuaded, I'm not sure if it was through the phone company or otherwise, that it was maybe a bit safer to still have that landline, at least for 911. What's your sense today?
Well, interestingly enough, I don't have a landline in my home any longer.
And you're the chief of police.
Right, about 2 years now, eliminated the landline, use a cell phone. The technology is changing such that our 911 operators working with the telephone companies can triangulate where the cell phone is from the towers, bouncing off the towers.
But is it as effective in terms of location as that landline? Look, if you're out of the home, amen, that you have cell phones, because in the olden days,
you had nothing.
And someone had to drive by and who knew what happened.
Right.
So of course, if you don't have that option, but do you feel it's as effective in terms of location in the amount of time that's needed?
Well, I think it's quickly getting there. It may not be as totally as effective as a landline. It's quickly getting there. The technology is changing, where the system will now be able to use GPS coordinates.
Literally.
And there are agencies that now have that technology. It's quickly coming into play. And so through the GPS technology, they'll be able to pinpoint exactly where the phone is. And then send 911 services to that location.
Now, I understand that through the board, wireless is really what you're looking at. I was looking at the website, and there's a lot of issues about wireless deployment, not just in kind of general communities, but on college campuses. Why don't you explain to us what's happening in that world?
Right. Well, there's a whole body of work related to what's called next generation 911. And our younger generations are more akin to using texting and instant messaging. And so we're looking at the capability of, should we allow that type of
technology
response into the 911 system? And there's some benefits to it because pictures can be sent, more data can be obtained, and so forth.
For example, and I don't want to be an alarmist, but let's say you're in a hostage situation.
Right.
You can't really call.
No.
But if you have your phone there, it might be that you're able to send a quick text.
Right.
Today,
correct.
Can we do that, or is it just you cannot?
Not everywhere. There are very few agencies that have some technology that allow that. So that's the technology we're looking at. What equipment do we need to allow that? How do we function with that type of technology? How do we work with that technology? And again, the technology is changing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up. And again, it wasn't that long ago that people had hard lines in their homes, and now they're doing away with that.
So what's your sense of the future of questions such as texting to 911? I mean, is that the wave of the future, that 911 will be able to accept a text, triangulate if necessary?
I absolutely believe it will be. I think most agencies are becoming much more technologically savvy, and for 911 services and any kind of police services, they're accepting that technology, and they're using social media much more. And so this is becoming very commonplace.
I want to ask you another area. I'm not sure if it's in your bailiwick, but about a month ago, I needed to contact a police department. There had been a mailbox that had been knocked over through an accident in front of our home, and I really didn't know how to contact the police department directly. And so I called 911, And I said, I have a non-emergency matter because the accident had occurred overnight.
Yeah.
And can you connect me to whom I need to speak? And what the 911 operator did is put me into a recording which said, calling 911 for a non-emergency is a felony. That was not my intent.
Right,
Is
right.
this familiar to you?
It's very familiar.
I didn't know what to do.
In larger agencies, there's separate 911 operators. In some of the smaller agencies, the 911 operator is the regular phone operator
Right.
as well. But the phone calls are prioritized. So when there's a 911 call, it gets answered first. And when citizens use 911 for non-emergency calls, they're basically diverting the
And I get
ability
it.
to handle emergency situations.
I get it, but
Right.
is maybe that's something that the advisory board can address because
Right.
there is some real confusion. I to this day I cannot tell you how I can contact the police in a non-emergency situation. I have
Right.
no idea.
Usually the best way is if you have to call information for a police department you're not familiar with, you ask for their non-emergency business line,
Right.
and they'll give you a non-emergency business line.
Are you familiar with systems called 311? Have you heard of these 311 systems?
I was just thinking that.
Right.
These are now very popular for different type information, and you can call that. I know some cities are adopting 311 and other systems.
And for our viewers, 311 is essentially, I know, for example, in the city of Los Angeles,
Right.
they call it your one call to City Hall. And essentially, it's not necessarily for safety issues. You can call there about
For any
potholes or
information.
whatever it is. But I would have presumed, see, I wasn't in LA city limits for that
Right.
moment. Otherwise, I would have called 311. I was in LA County limits. Maybe LA County has that system. I don't know the
Right.
answer. So what else is on the agenda of this new state 911 advisory board? I know you've recently joined, so I don't want to push you too
Right.
hard, but what else is kind of percolating?
Well, again, the technology issues is the driving factor that's keeping the 911 advisory board very busy.
And who are you advising? Are you advising the state legislature? Are you advising the governor?
The 911 Emergency Communications Office. I'm
Okay.
gonna look at my notes here.
No, that's okay.
These are all part. There's
That's right. I mean, I'm saying the
State
same-
911 Emergency Communications Division, which is part of the California Technology Agency Public Safety Communications Office.
Got it.
So we advise the State 911 Emergency Communications Division, their leadership,
Right.
and
And are
help set policies.
Are most of the board members senior law enforcement officials like yourself?
Well, there's law enforcement, there's fire service personnel, there's public safety dispatch personnel there. So anyone that has, there's several different organizations, CalNINA,
Right.
and
But-
APCO, and different
Right.
organizations that are related to the 911 system.
Let me ask you, if we do face a true disaster, be it man-made, be it nature, and the 911 system seems to go down for whatever reason, no criticism intended, what do we do?
Well, you need to be prepared. You know, I think particularly here in California, we know that we have earthquakes.
Right.
And you have to be prepared and have a backup plan of some means of communication if you can. Because you're right, everyone
Right.
wants to get on the phone
course.
and check with their family and make sure everyone's okay. But they and a million other people are trying to do the same thing.
So-
Or multiple millions of people are trying to do the same
And so really, in a natural disaster or man-made disaster, it's best to try to stay off the phone, except for
Absolutely.
true emergencies, so that the 911 system can receive the calls that are necessary. Cell phone or landline, I mean,
I think
is
you
there
know
a
they're gonna all be tied up. You're not going to be able to get through, and so you need to have a backup plan, whatever that is, with your family. You know, a place to meet or some
I
means
hear
of
you.
communications. You've got to have a backup plan.
His name is Mike Langston. He is the chief of police for the city of Signal Hill. He was recently appointed to California State 911 Advisory Board. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter California Edition. This is Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and our guest is James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council, and like myself, he is an attorney. We are both attorneys, and yes, go attorneys. I don't know if other people would agree, But be that as it may, you helped to spearhead a program that's known as Teen Court. I've heard of it. I've seen it in action. Why don't you tell us about it a bit? The history, and then we can talk about what's happening in Long Beach as an example.
Sure. Well, basically, it's justice by teens for teens. So, a lot of times, Brad, what happens with young people when they commit a small, offense, whether it's graffiti or vandalism, they get sent to juvenile hall.
Literally.
And when you go to juvenile hall, it's basically training gangsters, unfortunately.
It's a jungle.
Right, and we don't want people to go through there and have a career of crime. So we've said, why don't we divert people, give them a second chance, get them out of the criminal justice system, but also allow them to pay back their debts to society.
And so what crimes are eligible for the teen court, as an example, in Long Beach? I mean, is there a California kind of statute that sets forth what can be diverted? Do you know?
Well, we work with the local prosecutors, but basically non-violent, non-sexual crimes.
Right,
So we call them, they are misdemeanors, but
Right.
things like vandalism, things like graffiti, petty theft. Sometimes recently the trial I went to there was a theft of $20 from someone's book bag on school.
Okay.
So these are real offenses, but certainly not grave offenses. So the idea is, instead of going in front of a regular judge in a regular court downtown Long Beach, they go to Cabrillo High School, where they have a jury of their peers. They actually have about 20 young people who are at the high school, and
Why
they're the ones who
Cabrillo?
judge them. Well, Cabrillo's one of our newest high school. They've got a great facility, and also it's in a neighborhood which historically hasn't had a lot of the programs, a lot of the services.
But also, does it not have an academy?
That's right. They have an academy for law and justice, so this fits right into it. So
Perfect.
these are students who are studying for careers in law, and part of the idea of this program is there are careers you can have, whether it's being a judge, being an attorney, being a bailiff, being a court reporter. So this exposes people to the positive sides of the criminal justice system.
Are there prosecutors and defenders?
Well, what you have is you have a real judge who comes down from Long Beach Superior Court.
Okay.
He goes there, and the jury actually acts as both a jury and a prosecution. So the jurors, the young people, actually ask the questions. So the way it works is these young people, who are real high school students, ask the alleged criminals the questions. They have to answer the questions, and that jury then renders a sentence, either guilty or not guilty. And if they are guilty, they actually give them the verdict. So, or I should say the sentence. So they have to do things like community service, perhaps write a letter of apology to the victim, or even serve on teen court themselves. A lot of these people who've been convicted come back and have to serve on a jury for other people. So by doing this, young people see how the criminal justice system works in the real world, and then what happens is, upon completing that sentence,
Right.
the young people basically are released and they don't have to go through the regular criminal justice system.
You've been, you said.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell
I've
me
been
about
there.
it. Tell me about the case, if you remember, or cases.
Well, what's amazing is these young people taking it very seriously.
do.
And they might be laughing and joking around, but when teen court starts,
Right.
they're all business.
Is it 12 jurors,
And,
or do you remember?
well, I think we have about 18 jurors, so it's closer to 20.
Wow.
And the idea is to give more people a chance.
Sure.
The judge, who is a real Long Beach Superior Court judge, he requires that all 18 ask a question. So everyone participates, no one sits back. One of the things we've seen is some of these young people actually give out sentences that maybe even more draconian
exactly,
than adults.
right.
So sometimes the judges say, hold on a second, we can't give out 1,000
Right.
community hours, how about 100 or something? So one thing is, I think some of us thought these young people give other young people a slap on the wrist.
Right.
That's not the case. A lot of people take it very seriously because when they see their peers who are victims of crime, they want to deter that.
Do the jurors, are they allowed to know the defendant?
No, they're not. In
not.
fact, one thing we do is kind of like voir dire,
Right.
as you know as an attorney. We ask all the jurors beforehand, does anyone here know the defendant? If they do, they're excused.
I see.
And in fact, we typically don't have students at Cabrillo High School go before the Cabrillo High School jurors.
I understand.
But, so someone from the other side of town, but still, if they know it, they're excused. So they can be impartial.
Have you talked to a defendant? I mean, what's their sense of it? Are they angry? Are they appreciative? Do they understand?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I went there and I witnessed it.
You witnessed it, so you just stayed
I
back.
wanted to be fair
Yeah,
and
that's
not
fair. Okay, you
interfere.
stayed back.
But
what was your sense of them? I mean, were they steaming, brewing, or were they taking it seriously and realizing this is, what they're going to have to approach, and I'll deal with it?
Well, in my case, they were denying doing it. So there's a lot of
Right.
denial. And what was very powerful is their fathers actually were required to come. So their fathers are there. And the jury actually was allowed to ask
Fathers.
question of the fathers. And
Why fathers?
Well, they required that one guardian
One
come,
guardian, okay.
and so the fathers ended up
Okay.
coming. And they asked them, the jury asked some of the toughest questions of the fathers, such as, Do you know your son's been smoking marijuana?
Oh my.
What kind of curfew do you have for your children? Are you proud that your son's been charged with theft?
Oh my.
And some of these fathers really had to step back and say, you know what? No, we're not proud of that, and we're going to, this is going to change in the future. And they're taking responsibility too, because obviously, as young people, not just their young people, 16-year-olds, but also their parents. Both parents have responsibility too.
Well, good for you. It seems like a terrific program. I want to shift gears. It's not the easiest and smoothest of shifts, but why not? I want to talk about the environment here in the Long Beach area. We have the Port of Long Beach as well as the Port of Los Angeles. Huge economic engine. Give us a sense of how important the port is to Long Beach and Southern California generally.
Well, it's the number one industry. So it's bigger than any industry, bigger than tourism, bigger than manufacturing. Our number one industry in Southern California is goods movement. So, right here in Long Beach, you see basically 8% of our jobs come. 8%
Wow.
from goods movement.
That's a huge
our ports
number.
alone.
I can't imagine anything gets close to
Right,
that.
so it is our number one generator, and so we want that to sustain that, we want to grow that. But the question always has been, how can we grow the port but grow it green in ways that actually improve quality of life, not degrade it?
But I will say, there have been some programs that have been instituted that have looked at greening the port, plugging in instead of idling. A series of different programs. There's been looking at the air quality impact zones, the Clean Trucks program. But that being said, I understand that management in the city of Long Beach is concerned that a lot of this is being done in a piecemeal fashion.
That's right. So there have been a lot of great programs. The Clean Trucks program, the truckers have been tremendous partners. Other industry groups, we've had plug-in. But the question is, how can we take a holistic view of this? So instead of doing one project at a time, how about a master plan that would eventually be tied to the city's general plan to say, how do we want to improve these port-affected communities so that we can ultimately allow more port growth, get more jobs, more tax revenue, but at the same time, allow these neighborhoods to prosper. So I think part of it is a planning process. If you plan for success, you're more likely to get success.
But how do you create that balance? Because, look, some say you can be green and still make green. But there's no doubt that there is a tension there, that with environmental regulation and regulations that may increase, it can impact business. I don't want to take a position, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I think part of it is you work with industry. Instead of just regulating from the top down, you say, how can we get to where we need to go? For example, recently with the Middle Harbor project, we work with industry.
And explain that, because that's a huge project.
Well, it's a project that takes an old terminal and basically redesigns it, adds tremendous capacity, so we're growing the capacity, but at the same time, by putting in electric cranes, modern equipment, taking out diesel equipment, we're actually going to reduce the pollution. So it's pretty amazing. You actually expand the amount of activity while decreasing the pollution. So that's an example of something that's good for business. They're going to move more goods, make more money,
will create
and better for neighborhoods.
14,000 permanent jobs.
That's
this is going to be, it should be done, I understand, by the end of the decade, and a significant response to the Panama Canal expansion.
That's right. So it's going to help us compete with the Panama Canal. It's going to create construction jobs now, but also create jobs on a permanent basis. So that's an example of a very successful project. What we're saying is, those successful projects are great, but how can we have more of a master plan vision? For example, in the future.
But let me ask. I mean, the port is an agency of the city of Long Beach.
The port is a department of the city of Long Beach.
So you can effectuate change. I mean, they're not independent.
Right. Well, they're quasi-independent because they do have their own harbor commission.
Right.
The city council, we actually approve their budget, but the day-to-day affairs are managed by this commission.
Okay.
But what we're doing is this project is a joint commitment between the city of Long Beach and that department, the harbor department, saying we both want our neighborhoods to thrive and succeed.
Right.
So if we can plan for things like reduce air pollution in our west side, reduce noise pollution, reduce visual blight, and talk about how to get there, whether it's with air purifiers or reconfigurations of streets, that's going to allow business to grow.
Please come back and let us know what happens. We appreciate it.
Fantastic.
His name is James Johnson. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter, California Edition.